Welcome everybody to the first episode of the Crime Diaries podcast. I am very excited to start this journey with all of you, and once again, thank you all for listening. The infamous crime that I will be discussing today happened not too long ago and in the United States. So let's go ahead and dive in. In the small town of Frederick, Colorado, nothing out of the ordinary seemed to happen, and it was even known as one of the safest places to live in the country. However, in the year 2018, everything changed. The Watts family consisted of Shannon Watts, who was 34 years old, Chris Watts, 33 years old, and their daughters Bella Watts, 4 years old, and Celeste Watts, 3 years old. After ending her previous marriage, Shannon bought her own home at 25 years old, but suddenly started to have health problems. She started to isolate herself from her friends and felt like no one understood the inner battles she was facing. Soon after that, she was diagnosed with lupus. She described that as a very dark time in her life. One day, she received a Facebook friend request from a man named Chris Watts. He seemed normal, just like any other person. She thought it wouldn't be a big deal if she accepted him, since they were strangers and might likely never meet. She was wrong. Chris Watts was originally from North Carolina and was described as a good, smart, and shy person. At the time he sent Shannon the request in the year 2010, she had already moved from New Jersey to North Carolina. She rejected him a couple of times when he asked her to go out, but he never gave up. 2 years later, they get married in Charlotte, North Carolina, and in 2013, their first baby, Bella, is born. In 2015, their second daughter, Celeste, was born. Shannon had never been so happy and was so thankful to have Chris as her husband because to her, he was perfect. He had been there through her darkest times and stayed by her side. She was mostly proud of him for being the perfect father for her daughters. This was their permanent home purchased in 2013 in Colorado. This house reflects a typical American family living inside. However, this family was far from typical. Shannon had always had tension with Chris's parents, given the fact that they never attended their wedding and complained about Shannon's overprotective and sassy attitude. The tension and distance with the in-laws widened when Shannon visited North Carolina and dropped off her daughters at her in-laws' house. Shannon discovered that Cindy Watts, Chris's mother, gave ice cream with nuts to her daughters, who were both allergic to it. Cindy didn't see it as a big deal and blamed Shannon's overprotective behavior. However, Shannon was described as a good, protective, and caring mother who obviously cared about the health of her children. Everyone knew both daughters were allergic to nuts, especially Celeste, whose allergy was severe. This was definitely something strange that happened, and it was before Chris's arrival. As time goes by, Chris lands a new job as an operator in a big oil and natural gas company. On the other hand, Shannon starts working for a company called Lavelle, which focuses on weight loss advertising. She started to sell patches for weight loss and advertised the products on Facebook, where she uploaded many videos as she tried to sell more products. She would often go on paid trips from the company to places like New Orleans, Mexico, and the Dominican Republic, among many other places. She would sometimes take Chris, but other times Chris stayed at home with the kids. Eventually, Chris started to also use Shannon's weight loss patches, and he began to lose weight and get fit. On June 11, 2018, Shannon announces that she is pregnant and surprises Chris with the news. He thinks it is awesome, but there is something about his behavior that is quite off. Something is not right. The moment he walks in and sees Shannon, he freezes and then laughs awkwardly as he sees her surprise. He is not acting as enthusiastic about this pregnancy. His body language says it all. The evidence from texts between friends and Shanann's husband pointed to the fact that Chris was not pleased about this pregnancy and had no intentions of having another child with her. Shanann even canceled her gender reveal and texted her friend how hurt she was feeling. She even explained that Chris had no response when she grabbed his hand while she was getting an ultrasound. Over time, Chris started to act more distant with his family. During these times, he sometimes would go out and not come back home. He would also take a long time to reply to Shanann, almost completely ignoring his family. His behavior definitely displayed a red flag and concerned Shanann. On July 31st, 2018, Chris arrives in Washington and heads to North Carolina after not seeing his family for 5 weeks. Shanann is currently 13 weeks pregnant. The family went to Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, and at this point, Shanann notices there is something definitely wrong with Chris and knows their relationship hangs by a thread. Chris was being even more distant at this point and being cold to his family. Shanann's brother, Frankie Ruzek, remembers Shanann getting sick and even sleeping on the couch while her husband slept in the bedroom. Concern and suspicions brewed in Shanann's mind, leading her to vent more to her friends through text. She began thinking Chris might be cheating on her. One thing for sure, everyone knew Chris was not acting normal. On the early morning of August 13, Shanann's neighbor and co-worker, Nicole Atkinson, dropped off Shanann after her business trip. Both were good friends and were in constant communication with each other. Nicole knew Shanann had a doctor's appointment a few hours later and knew she didn't feel good. Unfortunately, Nicole never heard from Shanann that day. Nicole got very concerned about her and decided to call the police. Soon, Chris arrived home and the cop interrogated him. Nicole was so worried about her friend, and it was evident. Chris, on the other hand, didn't look worried in the slightest bit. Then they all went to the other neighbor's house, who has security cameras. The neighbors showed them the surveillance footage of the early hours of the morning and saw Chris loading things onto the back of his truck. At this point, Chris was displaying all sorts of anxious body language, touching his face and secretly wanting to disappear because he knew this made him a suspect. Minutes later, Chris left, leaving the neighbor and cop by themselves. The neighbor said that this was unusual behavior of Chris and that he never loads things into his truck at that time. Things were starting to slowly align. Chris appeared on television across many channels, and as he was being interviewed, he kept saying how he misses his family and wants them to come back home, wherever they were. However, he was showing no emotion, not even crying over his missing family or showing an ounce of worry. Soon enough, Chris was brought into the interrogation room, since all the evidence pointed to him. He did a polygraph test, denying knowing the whereabouts of his missing pregnant wife and daughters. He failed the polygraph test, but still, he claimed he didn't do anything to his family. However, he confessed he was having an affair with a woman named Nicole Kessinger all this time. Kessinger felt Chris was lying and told investigators she would tell them everything she knew. The investigators wanted him to confess to the murders, but Chris said he wanted to speak with his father. He told his father that he saw Shanann choking Bella and Celeste, and that she was the one responsible for the deaths of their children, explaining why he had killed Shanann. As much as he promised this was true, it was easy to see through his lies. Eventually, he confessed to killing his pregnant wife and 2 daughters. He dumped his daughters' bodies inside the oil tanks of the company he works with and buried his wife near the site. On November 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to a total of 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole by a judge. He pleaded guilty to a total of 9 felony charges. These charges were 2 counts of first-degree murder of a human younger than 12 years old, 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of tampering with a deceased body, and 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy. Even the judge said this was the most inhumane crime he had ever seen. This crime fits the individual theory of personality and crime, and this can be backed up from the micro-theories, psychoanalytical and psychological theories lectured by Christy Boyett. It says that criminal activity is the result of a defective, deviant, or inadequate personality. It further explains that examples of deviant personality traits include hostility, impulsiveness, aggression, and sensation-seeking. Some clinical researchers do believe Chris is a psychopath, since he shows all the tendencies and most likely deceived everyone with his charm. The fact that he also showed no emotion or worry while he claimed his family was missing is truly shocking and shows he is a psychopath. One more thing the lecture states is that the criminal does not have the ability to feel empathy, remorse, or guilt for his or her actions, and has not developed a sense of right and wrong. This perfectly describes the monster that is Chris Watts. For example, in the book Criminological Theory Past to Present Essential Readings by Rosenfeld and Messner, it says that, in other cases, it has been claimed that individuals hold values that do not directly approve of crime, but are conducive to crime, values such as seeking excitement or thrills, toughness, and the desire for quick, easy success. I believe, like many others, that Chris Watts wanted to get rid of his old life and start a new one with Kessinger, and without thinking, he murdered his family. This case is truly one of the saddest and most vile cases I have ever heard of. I don't understand how a father could do that to his own family. Many people and myself wonder, why couldn't he have just gotten a divorce? Yet, he lost his mind and did the unspeakable. I can't imagine what Shanann's family and close friends must have gone through. Yet, I admire their strength through those difficult times and for trying to keep Shanann and her precious daughter's memories alive. And this marks the end of the first episode of the Crime Diaries. Thank you all for listening and coming to my podcast. See you in the next one.